I'm so grumpy.
Oh, I know what you're going to. Yeah, I know where you're
so
going.
So grumpy, and I can't shake it.
Yeah.
I can't shake it, Bennett Doyle, because all football season, I work so hard as the general manager of not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 teams. I water those teams, and I watch them grow. And 5 of my 6 teams made it into the fantasy football playoffs.
Better than me.
And 3 of my 5 teams have been partially shouldered by players who played in last night's abysmal Thursday night football game between the Rams and the 49ers. And usually, we don't talk excessively about, no one wants to hear you talk about your fantasy football team. But
it's the playoffs.
Is different.
It's the playoffs.
And this is an epidemic that struck many. We are not alone in our sadness, but Cooper Kupp, 3 targets, 0 receptions, 0 points, and perhaps my worst play of the night, going with my starting quarterback of Brock Purdy, who had a grand total of 142 yards and an interception that took him from 7.42 points to 6.42 points. And now here we are coming off of the first night of the fantasy football playoffs, technically going into week 15 of the NFL season. And I've already lost.
Yeah.
I know it's not over until it's over, but I feel like it's over.
I'm literally in the exact same boat. This is like the worst fantasy. So I'm in 5 leagues. This is by far the worst season that I've ever had. I too consider myself a bit of a fantasy football expert. I don't know if you know this. I used to host a fantasy football show on AM radio years and years ago. And this is by far the worst year I've ever had playing fantasy. And 2 of my 5 teams made the playoffs. And then last night, I'm in the same boat you are. This team, I've scratched, I clawed, I fought my way into the playoffs. 7-7 record. It's been such an up and down season. And Matt Stafford, been on a roll, multiple touchdowns every single game. He's my starting quarterback. And that, yes, I know that sounds crazy. There's no other good quarterbacks out there.
It's fine, it happens.
And he 7 points last night. It's over. It's done. I'm done. I can't win.
It was the first game this season without a touchdown. And it comes night 1 of the fantasy football playoffs. Are you kidding me?
And there's like real play. I mean, you've got George Kittle, you've got Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua.
Jerry Jeudy's line last night was 75. He did nothing.
Yeah.
My only saving grace is that I'm so good in 2 leagues. I had a first round bye, and so I played Purdy and Juwan Jennings. The double J keeps getting me. Jessica Jane, Jerry Jeudy, and Juwan Jennings. We are the double J's. But Juwan Jennings, my only saving grace is that in those leagues where I would have played Purdy and Jennings, they don't matter because I had a bye within that situation. So I'm holding on to a prayer. But I was in a really gross mood watching that game last night, and it wasn't a particularly fun game of football to watch. Obviously, the Rams win. That's huge for their playoff hopes and dreams. They have about a 50-50 shot still of making the postseason. The NFC West continues to be intriguing. My husband, so depressed, had to go from watching the Warriors lose to the Rockets on Wednesday night, and then had to watch his Niners lose to the Rams and officially turn towards the draft. He will tell you that for the last 3 weeks, his attention has been towards the draft. But they were still holding on to a small smidgen of hope. And they got so many players back, and one of them being Dre Greenlaw, and that led to the big conversation coming out of this game, outside of the Rams winning and outside of no touchdowns and the fantasy football implications of it all, but the actual football of it all with De'Vondre Campbell, who's a linebacker for the Niners, who just quit in the middle of the game, decided that he was not going to go back into the game. He was basically signed, the backstory on him, he's basically signed as a rental with Dre Greenlaw out. Dre Greenlaw tore his Achilles. He's an all-pro linebacker. He finally was coming back last night. He plays the first half, and you're watching that Niners defense, and for a split second before you know the outcome of last night's game, you think, maybe this is going to start clicking for the Niners. Like, they're getting big defensive players back. Their defense looked good. Dre Greenlaw looked spectacular. But then he was out to start the second half, because coming back from an Achilles, it's hard. I've done it. Brandon Clark has done it. Aaron Rodgers has, well, we don't have to get into Aaron Rodgers at this point. And they went and they asked De'Vondre Campbell to go in the game, and he said,
"Oh, I'm good."
No. He said no. And Kyle Shanahan was asked about it afterwards, and he said that Campbell said he didn't want to play. George Kittle was asked about it, called it dumb and stupid and immature, and hopes he's never around anyone like that again. Campbell's teammates last night, not shy of words. Tavarius Ward called it sucker, S-H-I-T, and said he's probably going to get cut soon, which would be the expectation.
Oh, he won't play next week for that team.
He might never play again.
This
is where empathetic Jess comes in.
Yep.
Like, then I feel bad for him, right?
No, I don't.
None of us are our worst moment, but in the case of professional athletes, celebrities, like, so often your worst moment does become your label for the rest of existence. And like, even when this happens last night, you quickly get notes of, oh, well, we all remember when Vontae Davis retired at halftime. Oh, we all remember our last glimmer of Antonio Brown. We don't remember good Antonio Brown, and now we remember Cracker of the Day Antonio Brown and CT ESPN Antonio Brown. But from a playing perspective, your last image is him taking off his shirt, throwing up the peace sign, and running off the field. And now De'Vondre Campbell, who it's not like he was a household name. Now you're going to remember him as the dude who quit in the middle of the Niners-Rams game.
Yeah, I mean, actually, now that you say it, I guess he's going to have massive regrets the rest of his life about doing that, because it's why I don't feel bad about guys that sit out, like stars that sit out before the NFL season, because your NFL, like for the majority of players in that league, your window is super tight.
Right.
So like you have very limited opportunities to make your money and be able to honestly live off that money for most of them for, the rest of your life. And he blew it. Like, he's going to get cut. There's no way he doesn't get cut. After all that, you see all those quotes last night from Shanahan and the players, like, he's done.
He's going to get...
And he won't be on another team.
And think about the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree that extends all throughout the NFL. And so if someone's calling up Kyle Shanahan and is like, hey, are you going to vouch for this guy? Chances are he won't. So... by nature, I'm a little sap. I feel bad for him, but I also understand. Like, you can't do that. What if I just walked out right now? What if you had to do a solo show right now?
I'd try my best.
That would be a tough scene.
Yeah.
I was listening, before we move on to the Grizzlies, I was listening to the Athletics NFL podcast this morning, just listening to their recap on last night's festivities. And within it, I couldn't help but smile because they paused and they were like, you know what one of the craziest pieces of football trivia is? And I didn't know where this was going. And they said, do you know who was on the Memphis football roster in 2019? And they got it a smidge wrong because they included Darrell Henderson, who was last on it in 2018. But then they started listing because Patrick Taylor
plays for the Niners,
on the Niners now, and Guerrero was able to play last night. But the thought was he might have some extended run. And they go on with Patrick Taylor, Antonio Gibson, Kenneth Gainwell, Calvin Austin.
Man.
That's crazy. But it was so fun. They're like, yeah, that's my favorite piece of football trivia to throw out and ask people about. I'm like, yeah, that was a stacked team. And Antonio Gibson was a receiver.
Stacked. Yeah, it's wild how many of those guys got into the league and have actually had longevity in the league now at this point. It's pretty cool. Well,
I wish everybody best of luck if you feel as if your fantasy football playoff matchup has already tanked. Perhaps you can come back.
I hate Thursday games. I hate when it comes to fantasy football. It literally never goes well, ever. If you have someone that you have to count on a Thursday night game in fantasy, it's never going to go your way, ever.
That's true.
Yeah.
The Jessica Benson Show with CJ Hurt, live every weekday at 8 a.m.